Namaste everyone. Very warm welcome to Satsang today. Muji ji ki. Very warm welcome to everyone online as well. If you have questions, you can ask them in the chat window, and you can confirm that the video and audio are fine if you're able to. So this is the questioner chair, which is barely getting used these days. Come.
This desire for search, I don't know what I'm searching. What I'm searching? Please help me out. I don't know what I'm searching. Right from 6th standard I'm searching. All techniques, all phase 1, phase 2, everything. I don't know what to do now.
So he says that there's been a lot of searching. He says from the 6th standard onwards there's been a searching, but it's not clear what I'm searching for. But the seeking has been there. So what do I do now? What do I do now? Tired.
I have to drop this even desire of search. Please help me out.
What does searching mean?
Myself. Who is this? Who is this running around many things? Running around children, running around school, running around factories, do production. What is it? What is it? I don't know what I'm doing now. This is a very, what I say this, trilog. Either here or not there. I don't know, but again I've come here. I don't know, I want just to stop here.
Just to stop. Just to stop. He's saying that he just wants to stop now. Stop. Then stop.
Such.
Stop. What prevents you from stopping? That's the question. So you want to stop. Enough of the search. And you've also heard this, that if you are the self, you must be here now, isn't it?
Yes.
The self must be here. Otherwise it's an illusory self. If it's coming and going, then it's Maya. Then it's not the truth, isn't it?
Okay.
So if you're searching for the self, where must it be? Can it be somewhere else?
Here.
It can only be here. Therefore, why we have to run to find it? You only have to stop. So stop now.
Stop.
Stop. Don't think about how to stop. Just stop. It's okay, we have time. Take your time. Stop means what? Stop means don't pick up your next thought. Let the thought come and let it go. You don't go with it. Hmm? What should happen if you stop? There's an expectation that something should happen?
No.
No expectation. Very good. So, what we have been searching for has always been here. If it is real, it must be ever present. No? Only the unreal comes and goes. Yet we have this idea that I must search for something, as if it is not me already. We call it the self. We already use the term called self, yet we look for it somewhere else. What does self mean in English alone? What does self mean?
English. Self means myself.
Self, it's here, no?
It's here.
So why we need to find it somewhere else? You said you've been searching from 6th standard. You've gone here, gone there, done this, done that, done so much inquiry. Who am I? Who am I? Whose life? No? But if the self is you, then why must we find it anywhere else? Yes, it's good. I don't know, it's very good.
This what I'm seeing now?
No, it is not what you are seeing. It is the seeing itself. It is not the content of what you are seeing. It can never be the content. The appearance can never be it. To what it is appearing, that is it. You can slow down, it's okay. So, you are asking what I am seeing now. Seeing is always in front. You are always seeing something in front, no? You are seeing something, correct? So that is an appearance. What appears will disappear. All appearances come and go. So that is not it. The seeing itself, the awareness of what you are seeing, does that come and go?
No.
That does not come and go. Where are you?
Here.
Are you in the seeing?
No.
You're not in the content, no? So anything can come and anything can go, but the awareness is ever present. Can you ever say that I am not aware?
No.
No, awareness is ever present. Where are you in relation to this awareness?
Here.
Yes.
Here. Yes.
So from here, what do you need to search for?
Nothing.
Hmm?
Nothing.
Have you ever been anywhere else?
No.
Now you understood stopping?
Yes. Yes.
What are you feeling now?
Nothing. Empty.
Is there a lack in this emptiness?
No.
Is there another need to do something?
No.
Is there any need for some experience?
No.
Where is the searching now?
No searching. So nice, so wonderful. So I was with so much dynamite inside. And now
Then nothing. Huh?
nothing. No, no.
You feel so much,
So much.
and then
So much, so big dynamite. No, no, no.
not even a bijli bomb.
No, nothing is there. Nothing. Nothing. Nothing.
Isn't it a joke?
Yes.
So many years searching.
Yes.
Where was it?
I don't know. I don't know.
What is here now? No? So if it is real, it must be ever present. The mind says, go find it there, do this, do that, then you might find it. It creates a search out of something which is ever present. That's the whole joke, isn't it?
Myself.
Your own self.
Searching
Exactly.
for the self.
Very good. It's good.
Thank you so much.
Very welcome. Actually, when he came in, the first thing he told me is that I'm not going to search anymore. I'm tired of searching. No searching anymore. So eventually, even the seeker identity is dropped, no? Because it itself can be a very powerful form of identification. The spiritual ego, I am a seeker, I am seeking God. All these can become very strong identities. It's very, very simple. What we speak about in satsang is very, very simple. Just 3-4 main things we talk about all the time. The same thing repeated in various different forms. No? So maybe we can go over them. There's some new people also. So just so that we know that what is it that we are really talking about in satsang. So the first thing that we are saying is that the mind is a trickster. The mind is a trickster. What was meant to be just a servant to be used for practical things has become the lord of our lives. But it has no power of its own. So the mind is a trickster, but it has no power except our own belief which we give to it. And then how does it work? It works through thoughts. So it's all clear, complete freedom is here. Then a thought comes, I must find something, I must do something, I must be something. And then when our attention and belief goes to this thought, it becomes a part of our identity. So where there was complete freedom, then there seems to be now an identity. And slowly what happens is all of these ideas come together and create this virtual figure called the person, virtual entity called a person. And we energize it with so much belief that we start leading the life of this person. It's just a collection of ideas. So at one point of time, a person is made up of just their collective sum of beliefs. That's why we say that it is a second level of unreality. The person is a second layer illusion. No? So even if we were not to say that the world is an illusion, even if we were to say all of this is real, then even in this layer of reality, the person does not exist. Because you cannot show me where the person is. No? Some will point to the body and say, yes, this is the person. Initially, the idea is to point to the body and say, this is the person. No? And then I say, but the body is just made up of all the food that you've eaten. Then, I cannot be all the food I've eaten. It's made up only of all the food that we've eaten. And it's clear that there's something more to us than just the food that we've consumed. So you say, okay, so you're not the body. Then what must you be? I am this person. So if something has to be real even at this layer of unreality, then he must have some time and space. She must have some time and space. Where is it? When is it? When does it come and go? It has none of this. You say, where is the person now? No, if we can just allow ourselves to investigate this very simple thing, then this whole layer can unravel very quickly actually. It has no legs to stand on. And then when that is seen that this person was completely imagined, then what is left now? So we realize we created a mythical entity called a person by believing our thoughts. So if you are willing to experiment for some time and say, okay, for some time I will not believe my thoughts. So all this energy which is coming and going is allowed to come and go, and what remains? Most beings have never questioned a thought also, because it's been so much a part, intimate part of our life, we never question our thought at all. It's only first time when you come to some meditation or some classes, vipassana or some program, that many beings first experience, oh, there's this separate energy called thought which comes and which goes. Unfortunately, what happens is Many beings get stuck in the idea of trying to improve the quality of their thoughts. My thoughts are of this type right now. How can I become a better person by thinking better thoughts? Isn't it? Most of self-improvement programs, self-help programs are about this, isn't it? And there's so much force applied. I'll not have negative thoughts, only think positive, think positive, think positive. And most of them become very frustrated with this whole self-help idea. Because how long will they think positive? It's very forced. It's a lot of effort. Which means that to find that better person, you have to put in a lot of effort and recondition it with a set of new thoughts. But the basic nature of the mind is to attack or defend. No? It is attacking reality or it is defending the person, which basically means the same thing. Right? Otherwise it has no purpose. It's very simple ways we talked about this, where even before we enter a restaurant, the mind is saying, okay, let's order this, or what am I going to say to the waiter, today is going to be. So it's sort of preparing you for the future. No? There could be, before you enter the restaurant, there could be some very beautiful flowers, at the gate. You won't even notice because the mind is saying, okay, today I'm not going to have the tacos, I'm going to have the nachos, something. No? So it is preparing the life of this person without any need to do any of this. It is completely unsolicited advice, unneeded advice. But we find ourselves initially dependent on this sort of advice, and we've become so used to listening to it that initially when it is said in satsang, let go of your thoughts, it's like we again give that to the thought and say, let go of thoughts. And the mind will say, what rubbish, what are you doing? It's like, Vaishnavi, where have you got me? So initially that kind of resistance can come from the mind. This is the only resistance which we are trying to dissolve in satsang. Because if there's a little openness, if there's even a slight amount of openness, you will see that this is so true. This is exactly what has been happening. I've just been leading the life of my thoughts. Give her a cushion. And then you've tried all various things, tried all various goals. In self-help you read about various goals, and then you find none of these goals have given me the happiness which I was looking for. Then comes this goal of liberation, freedom. This will give you the ultimate happiness itself. The mind itself runs this program. It will never tell you that just be here now. Nothing else is required. It'll say, but if somebody says be here, it says what happens to my ambition? What happens to my life? What happens to my money? What happens? Who will look after my parents? All this nonsense. All this will come. There is nobody here has said that you must not do any of these things. But it just presumes. It tries to scare you out of this. Because if this you understand, that I don't need to go anywhere, then its game is over. So it puts up a fight by giving you all this fear. What are the gifts that your mind is giving you? It's giving you regret, it's giving you guilt, it's giving you fear, it's giving you resentment. Has it given you even a little bit of peace? So many years it's given you a lot of things, but has it ever given you even a little bit of peace? In fact, we have understood that peace means when there is no mind. When no thoughts are bothering me, that is when peace is there. And even this problem, we give it to the mind only. Hello, how should I be in a state where there are no thoughts? And it'll say, go do a meditation program, go do phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 or some this thing. No? It'll never say just be. Let go of everything, just drop it. No, it'll never say stuff like this. Because if you find the way to peace, then the mind will lose its supremacy. It's like a small, what is that cute dog? The Pomeranian has taken control of the lion. He's saying, let's go here, come, I'll take you for the walk, and the lion is following. Does it have any power of the lion? No, it's just one gulp and it can be swallowed. But because the lion believes that this is mine, it is attached to this, and it believes that it is giving me some value or some meaning, and it is pointing me to the right direction. We've given ourselves to this small puppy who's been running our life. So satsang is finding the lion that you really are. If you are able to just ask, who is following the directions of the mind? Who is the mind speaking to? If you are able to sincerely ask this question for just a minute, then your discovery of your true nature cannot be far. But if you just follow here, no matter how spiritual destinations it takes you, to the best pilgrimages, to the most holy places, no, it will not lead you to freedom. But luckily, there is hope, right? There is hope. So, there is a deeper force. There is a deeper force called intuition, which when we are tired of suffering, the voice of intuition comes, and you will find that it speaks so clearly to you, and it's accompanied with so much love, peace and joy that its voice is irrefutable. It doesn't have to speak in necessarily words. You just have a strong feeling when you go to a bookshop and you buy the book. Like many people start with books like Autobiography of a Yogi. They say, I don't know why I picked this book. It just spoke to me when I entered the bookshop. That is the voice of your intuition. So, if there is even a little openness and desire for freedom here, then the path will be led very beautifully through this intuition. And this becomes such a beautiful tool for us. And the master's voice is just the same voice of the intuition itself. It's the same. So the same voice which is not so apparent initially to us inside, then a master appears in the external world. But if any master says that I am different from your own true inner being, then I would be very suspicious of such a master. There is nothing special in any body. All bodies are made up of the same stuff. So it is not about the body at all. This body is being used in this way, but doesn't make the body in any way special or different from anything else. It is just pointing you towards your own truth, which is ever present with you. So a true master will always point you inside. And even the only rule which we have, which is the rule of, I joke and say that the only rule we have is that you must come to satsang. But if I sense in your words that the only that what is speaking there, which is speaking here, then even this rule does not apply to you, because I know then that I am there with you completely anyway. Then it is completely, if you feel joy, then you can come. If there is joy anyway wherever you are, so it becomes just a game. Just a game. So that's why there are no practices here. There are no practices here. It is the dropping of all doing. The mind will come up with a lot of resistance. It will say, I say, okay, just let go, or I say, drop it. The mind will say, isn't that a practice? No? But it isn't. It isn't. It is our natural state. But because we are so used to doing it a certain way, it's like Muji's jokes and says, you're so used to carrying the bags. When somebody says, put down your bags, then the mind says, you're asking me to do something. So all that is being said here is that you're carrying this weight needlessly, just put it down and leave it. This weight is what? This weight of all our beliefs, ideas, this person basically. So this is basically what we speak about in satsang, no? Mostly this. And it's not like a hypothesis. No, it's not just a conjecture. It is verified experience of many beings, even beings who've been coming to satsang for some time, that nothing was required to be done. All that I did was give up this false concept of the person. No? Even that, in the presence of satsang, it dissolves on its own. But sometimes what happens is, because it comes so easily, the mind is easily able to sell you some thoughts about doubt. It's like that, no? Like many years ago, I used to run an NGO which used to provide free healthcare services to children in the urban slums of Bangalore. Now what happened is, we realized that because we don't charge anything, beings felt that the quality is not good. No? And there were quacks in the area who were charging 50 rupees for a distilled water injection, and there were queues outside that. Whereas we had qualified doctors and we were not charging anything, and people were very suspicious. Right? What is going on? Similarly in satsang, when it is said, nothing is required, just stop, let go. But what about all those guys? You know, they charge so much money to do this part 1 and then this part 2 and this. All that is okay. I've been through some of that, and it has helped. It has helped in some way. But it is not a requirement for freedom. So like my master jokes, he says that if this was a training program of how to make wine out of water, or how to make $1 million, then there'd be queues from here to forever. But here what is being pointed to is your ultimate freedom. You lose the ability to suffer. Mind will say, really? No? And it's even more suspicious because there's no charge here for anything. No? Not a single rupee is taken as donation. No charge has ever been taken. Like, something is wrong with it. It's very weird. There's 10,000 rupee entry charge to come to satsang. I'm sure there'll be more people in satsang than there are today. No? So we create that. The mind is very attracted to the scarcity principle. No? You heard about? Some of you have heard about the scarcity principle, where Apple will say only 10,000 iPhones available, and millions will queue up. You know, those lines, they start sitting at 2 o'clock in the morning and saying, when is the store going to open? Enough demand, don't worry. Maybe that is why some teachers have understood this and said, okay, this is going to be very exclusive and it's going to be very, but somehow I don't find a capability here at all to come to you and say, hey, you want to get into satsang, you better pay something. Just doesn't. And you would tell by my expression that I'm just making a joke, you know, just not. So, and other masters have tried different things, right? They've said, let me see whether you're worthy or not. You come and do seva in my ashram for 10 years, then we will have a one-on-one meeting and I will tell you the truth. I really want a photo of that disciple when he hears the truth. You know, you have always been that. Like what? 10 years I spent doing seva, and you said I have always been that. I thought you were going to give me some kundalini or some. Have you read any testimony of a disciple who did like this? And it'd be very interesting to find out. So, what is true and what is real has always been here. Therefore, stop chasing. Stop running around here and there. What is making you run around? It is this monkey mind which is leading the tiger. The king of the jungle is being led by a monkey. If in some alien race, suppose this never happened, and they were to come to earth and see that we are just so deluded by our minds all the time, what would their reaction be? What? You're believing your thoughts? Really? In that way, we could be called prehistoric in some way. Because look at ancient scriptures, suffering from the same issue. No? How many thousands of years? The same dilemma. Same, how to do with my desire, I want freedom, same. Money, relationships. Our key problems have been the same for centuries. This health of the body, our financial security, our relationships. What else? You run out actually when you start thinking of the key problems. What else? No? Just these three. Then that higher problem comes. When we are tired of dealing with all the other stuff, then the higher. Who am I? Man search for meaning, no? Man search for meaning. That is the glamorous, sophisticated problem to man. So these four, correct? This is what it's been for so many lifetimes. Trying to sort out relationship, money, health. No? Different variations. many lifetimes go like this only. I say, okay, once these three things are settled, then we come to this. I will find my purpose, or what am I doing here? And even then we settle for something. I'm a little scared to say what is going to come out next. But even then we settle for things like, okay, my life is to serve others. No, I can say from my own experience that this was there. When I started the NGO, it was like that. I am here to serve others. No? But no idea who I am. Still no idea who I am. Still coming from a personal perspective. Is there joy in that? No. Because we are still looking for gratitude. We are still looking for that feeling that I have done something special, even in charity. If somebody comes and they take your charity and they're not happy, are you at peace then? That is the difference between being an instrument and being a person who is doing charity. If there is no concern about the outcome, then that is true charity. If there is still, oh, I'm making a difference in this slum and I'm doing this, and the I is still so dominant, then it is all personal. And life will ensure that you don't settle for just that. It will give you enough wax to shake you out of this place also. So basically our life is revolving around these 3-4 parameters, and once the first three are sort of settled for many, then they start looking for the fourth, the purpose, or to be of use or something. There are some who have seen that, this is what happens, so they say, okay, I want to jump this curve and go straight to the top. But when suffering does not go away, even in the most the line of work with the most honor, when suffering still remains, then we say, hey, what is really going on here? I was told that if you just serve others, then I will not suffer anymore, but I am still suffering. Because there is still this me and the other. I am still serving others. So as long as there is the me and the other, there can be no end to the suffering. Because it is a untrue position. We are still standing on shaky ground. So all that can come and go cannot be you. If it is you, then you have a very shaky state of being. If our happiness, our peace is dependent on something which is movable, then all our life goes in defending that. If it is a relationship, then we are like protecting that relationship all of the time, in that process ruining it completely without realizing. This is what happens, right? We say, I have found happiness in this person. Then anybody else, any other man talks to that person, you're like, oh, what's happening? You're trying to protect that thing. It comes from here, and in that desperation we ruin the relationship itself. Because there is nothing more repulsive than this desperation, clinginess, need. Same. Even for money. So we made some money, We're then protecting, how do I put it, which is the best instrument, I shouldn't lose it. You know, then we're thinking about the money all of the time. And that fear, so much fear around it, life will give you situations where the money will get lost. So if we spend our whole life protecting something which inherently is phenomenal, hence ever changing, then it is a complete waste. It is much better to find out that which is never changing and ever present. And we can never find it in the world, can we? In the phenomenal world, can we say something which is ever present and never changing, completely stable? Any phenomenon? And somewhere we recognize this, a subtle level. We recognize these things, no? Everything is changing. That's why we go after things which are durable. No? Durability. Diamonds are, they don't. It takes millions of years to change the diamond. So we are looking for that stability, durability here, where it is always to be found here. I know why I'm speaking about relationships so much, but same, no? What is the best kind of man or woman? The loyal one. Stable, no? Not going. In all of this, we are looking at what is the best financial instrument? The fixed deposit. It is fixed, not going. So we're looking for that stability in the external world, but what we really need to do is find it here. So it will not be here, it will not be outside. You find out who you are and whether that is stable or not. Otherwise, you're in for this roller coaster ride, which will continue. Anything. It could be anything. It could be our children, it could be our partners, it could be money, it could be our real estate, it could be anything. Nothing is constant. So find out that constant which is ever constant. Who are you? Is that constant? So any beliefs which you have about yourself which are not constant means that they can be let go of. Find out that which is unchanging, unmoving. And we don't have to work hard at it. I mean, it's not like think and find the solution. No? And intellectual understanding is also useful. I'm not saying it is not. So to get an intellectual understanding is useful, but ultimately even this intellectual understanding will be seen to be just another set of concepts. So even in satsang, it is not the words of satsang. So they are useful pointers, but eventually the presence of satsang must be felt. And there is nothing that you can do about it. Because I'm scared that the minute I say something like that, you're saying, oh, I'm not sure, am I feeling the presence? What am I doing wrong? Let me feel. It's not that. It is just that it will happen. If you're in the cauldron of satsang, the boiling will happen. There's nothing that you can do or not do about it. Thank you. Let's see if you have a question online. It's so funny because just now I got that glass of water on the video which is being bought. It's funny. You should try doing this sometime. It's quite a takes some time to get used to, because the video of yourself is 1 minute later. No, so somebody just handed me a glass of water there. I'm like, oh, what's happening? So just in the same way as we can watch that video of ourselves, we are watching this video of ourselves. Okay. So, what doubt can still have some juice for any of you that we can expose, and very openly, because as long as what happens is, the secret about secrets is what to us they seem like they're a very important big thing, and once it's exposed and people are hardly reacting, you're like wondering, hey, did you hear correctly what I just said? Nobody is bothered. We feel, oh, that it's this horrible thing and I must hide it from the whole world. I don't understand anything that I hear in satsang. Can I expose this? What will the other think of me? Then we think, then you're pretending to hear. It's better to just say, okay, you're talking a load of rubbish. Please tell me what is it that you really want to tell me. I would much rather have that conversation than if you're hiding the secret. Saying, I feel good in satsang, but I don't have a clue what he's talking about. What are you saying? And why are these people nodding? They're so stupid. They just act. It's like me reading Krishnamurti for the first time. Okay, I can't see myself in the video now, so okay, it's back, it's fine. So it's much better to. You had a question? No, it's okay. Yeah. Yes. What do I mean by don't believe your thoughts? Yes. So the next thought can come. The next thought can appear. Our attention can be given to it. But the thought can be, I should walk out of this satsang right now. Suppose this is the content of the next thought. You have the power to believe it or no? Yes. You have the power to believe it. So I'm saying that withdraw this belief from all thoughts that appear. Yes. So let's take another example. Right now you're sitting, a thought comes that I need to drink some water. No? If your belief is not given to it, it is just allowed to go. But if you give the belief to it that I need to drink some water, you will find yourself with that desire for water. Until that water is not given to you, you will suffer with that desire. So very slowly we can look at it. You can look at an actual thought if you want to do that. But I'm just creating examples of thoughts that could come, very simple ones. No? So a thought came, and if attention and belief is not given, then it went away. No? But if a thought came and said, yes, this is true, I need water, it becomes a desire. Until that desire is fulfilled, it is like a stress or a tension which you are living with. No? Till this desire fulfillment is not there, you are suffering. But when the thought came, you had the power to believe it or not. It's good, we can take lots of time on this because this is very, very important. Please.
So what is the difference between attending to a thought and
Yes.
believing the
Yes.
thought?
So there are two forces. There is the force of attention, and then there is the force of belief. Okay. So let's take another example of the outside world. I can give attention to this chair. I can give attention to this chair. You know? But then, the minute it becomes my chair, it has a different quality to it. I mean, there's something which is created like an identity. Okay, let's take another simple example. Just look at any object. Maybe look at this carpet. It has these flowers. Okay. Now, you have given your attention to it, right? But there will be some interpretations happening about these flowers. That they are like this, they could be like this, something will be happening. And those you can decide to believe or not. So the appearance is given attention to, but belief has a different quality about it which becomes part of my identity based on the belief. So it could be that something appears and just allowed to go. So attention can still be given to it. But unless we make it a part of our identity in some way, it does not have the capacity to bother us. It's very subtle, and most beings have not looked at this, right? Yeah.
Is it something like, suppose I get a thought,
Yes.
there is this flaw in the system.
Correct.
It can be in my house, it can be in
Yes.
my office.
Yes.
Now when the thought comes, if I attend to it, it means I'm looking at it again and again and holding on to it.
Yes.
That is attention.
Yes.
Now if I believe the thought,
Yes.
it means that I believe the content of that thought.
Correct.
That I'm proposing this change.
Correct.
Or I'm diagnosing a flaw.
Exactly. Exactly.
My diagnosis is right.
Correct.
That is belief.
Yes.
And not ignoring the thought is attention. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Decided-
Sure, that's a very good way to put it, because for belief there must be a interest in the content of the thought. No? For attention, something can emerge, can be given attention, and then attention can be withdrawn. But you cannot believe without focusing on what it is trying to say. Then what would you believe? Yeah? So attention can be given and it can be withdrawn, but it does not leave a residue. No? But when we become interested in the content, we believe there is some meaning in this for me, then we are stuck. So let's take the ATM example which came up a few weeks ago. We said that to be miserable is the simplest thing in the world. How? We have an ATM which is always with us, which means anytime misery, which is the mind, right? So this anytime misery is always with us, which is another name for the mind, this ATM. How does it work? First you put in your, what is it, attention to mind card, ATM card. You put the attention to mind card, and then you enter your personal identification. So first you give it your attention, and then you identify with it, you believe it, and only then can you get the misery. If you were to not do these two steps, you cannot get the misery from the mind. So both are needed, both attention and the identification. Go ahead. I can sense there's
In my
something.
own life, actually, I look back in the last 70 years, I had a lot of thoughts,
Yes.
ideas,
Yes.
beliefs, very strong ones. I always thought I was doing the right thing by having opinions, strong ideas on every single topic.
Yes.
This is the way things ought to be. This is how we should improve things.
Correct.
The intentions appeared to be good.
Yes.
It was always well intentioned. But slowly I think I began to feel that maybe it's not just the workings of the ego.
Yes.
The inability to accept that people will be different, they will act differently, and they are propelled by their own inner
It is in fact that even the most horrific villain in any story always believes that he is justified, because his thoughts are telling him that he is justified. No, I'm not saying that you are. I'm just saying that everybody, even the most horrific villain, believes that he is just in what he is doing. He will say, the system has done this to me, I am reacting against the system. Some justification will always be there. So there is nobody who feels that they were badly intentioned in doing some action. There is nobody. You talk to the people in the jail, they will also say, this one did this, that's why I did this happened, and that's why I did. So everybody feels that their intentions were just and their ideas were just. This is the trick of the mind, isn't it? But it operates on this very basic belief that God does not know how to run our life. This is pure arrogance. Without even being labeled arrogance in the world, this is the strongest arrogance. Is that God, we can do everything else, but my life needs my mind's intervention. I need to follow my thoughts to make my life better, or to make the lives of those around me better. And this mind knows nothing at all about what is good or what is bad, or what is better or what is worse. And just last week we were talking about this thing about how I want to help some children or something like that. And he said, yes, it's good, but how do you know that you're providing that meal twice a day is really what the child needs? We're taking a subject which is very, for the whole world it will seem obvious, right? What do you mean? Obviously providing that 2 meals to the child is what he needs. But how do we know this? Maybe if he had not provided those 2 meals, life had a different plan for him, which could have taken him to freedom from complete suffering. Somebody else would have shown up who could have done something else. We don't know. That is why it is best to just go with what is appearing naturally, and there will be this intuition which guides us moment to moment. But the minute we say from a personal level that I must do this, then we are stuck. We cannot see what something is for. The mind cannot see what something is really for. And life is not vindictive for anyone. It is always taking people towards what is complete truth in every moment. So coming from this perspective that I know better is we all do it, but it's a very arrogant belief. How do we know what is best for ourselves or for another being? I'll take from my own how this life is played out. When I was losing this company that we built for many years, and it had got great value and all of that, when I was losing it, it seemed like it is the worst thing to ever happen. If at some point somebody had told me it is grace, I would have slapped him. Grace, you shut up. But now I can say that what was learnt in that entire experience, the strength which was found here, I would not give that up for anything at all. No? So now you can tell me it is grace. It is seen that it was pure grace. So we do not know what anything is for. You could be losing a multi-crore company, and that is also grace. You could be losing, these are very tough words to hear for some, but you could be losing a loved one, and that is also grace. So everything will be seen ultimately as pointing you home. And eventually you will see that all of this is just nothing more than a video game actually. Play around with it, but don't give it so much importance. You just, all these things. It's like so many people come with examples. I thought of my friend after 20 years, and that day he called me. No? So many so-called, but if you were to calculate the mathematical probability of some of these occurrences, they are 1 in a gazillion or something. Just not possible to happen. Just shows you, life is showing you that all of it is just a projection. It's just a projection of consciousness itself. So pretend to know that I know that this is right and this is wrong, this is what you should do and this is what you should not do, this is what I should do and this is what I should not do, can all be left aside now. And you will see that there is a supreme intelligence which is running all of this. I say sometimes to the more scientifically minded ones, who invented the constant of gravity? Was there a committee? Let's give this value to gravity. It's a constant, no? So, who invented it? Who invented the laws of physics? They say that species evolve, right? But I will die, and the next generation will also die, and the next generation will also die. I didn't sit on a committee that said next wale generation ko give them better hearing or give them better brains or give them nothing. There is a supreme intelligence which is keeping track of all of this. That's why I laugh a lot when somebody says that Darwinism is the opposite of, it's anti-God. It proves the existence of God. It actually proves the existence of God, because what is the intelligence which is keeping notes about everything and then changing it in the next and the next and the next? Those beings are not, those animals are not. No? So there is a supreme intelligence which runs the entire universe. I say the entire multiverses. So because the projection can project in many ways. You can see many different realms and many different worlds. There are beings here. Let me not psych out. So let's not worry about that stuff. All of this is just a projection. It can play out in any which way. Find out that which is not a projection. Find out that which is ever unchanging. Yes. So first we can see that the thought that disturbs us. So we can look at some examples. Right? A thought could come that I want to go to Europe. Not disturbing for you because you have no identity around going. Suppose you don't have any identity around going to Europe. A thought comes, I'm a horrible husband. That will have a pinch for some. So this will have a pinch. Why? Why did the thought about going to Europe not have any juice, but this thought about being a bad husband or a father or a bad worker, whatever my job is, why do these have more pinch? Why are these more disturbing? Let's look at this. There could be millions of thoughts, but these special ones which have more pinch. Why? There's a sense of identification with these aspects, and there's a investment that has been made into believing in these thoughts. That I'm a very, like one of the most common beliefs, I'm a very honest person, very truthful person. So there's a lifetime of investment into reinforcing this thought, and somebody comes and says you're a liar. You will want to do anything, right? Because so strong, I think. So to know that this identification, all these identifications have just been nothing but thoughts which I have taken into myself. No? If somebody is not a very honest person, in his childhood he might get an idea that, honesty is not getting my father anywhere. So let me be a dishonest person. Yeah, that's valid from his perspective. He's seen a very honest, suppose IAS officer or something, who is very honest, and all his father's friends are fully, so much luxury, so much this thing. And his father is very honest. So he says, this honesty is all for books. So he bought this thought and became part of the identity. The rare ones. Most people have this conditioning from parents, from books, from our own mind. I must be very honest. I must be very honest. So it could be either. When you were a child, you could have had either thought. I'll be very honest, or this honesty thing is not for me. Right? You would have got, if you had this honest one, then you will suffer because of it. You see? So once it becomes part of our identity, it has the potential to be attacked, because it is unstable anyway. Nobody can predict these things. Nobody can predict these things. I cannot say whether I'll be honest tomorrow or not. It's like that. A lot of personal stories coming out today, but once it's very funny how this sequence of events happened. Okay, and I'm not sure we should be recording this, but anyway. So there was a very close friend of mine. She was part of the big, anti-corruption thing and all of that. So we said we should create some anti-corruption bands, and we should have those bands, and if anybody sees those bands, they know never to ask us for bribe. Now this girl, many years ago, her bike had been stolen from ISIC. Okay, so her bike had been stolen, and she filed a police case and things like that. After like 10 years, the court hearing came up. In the court hearing, the public prosecutor says, where is that? So they found, the police, fantastically enough, found the bike, recovered, and gave it back to her within like 6 months of when that incident happened. Now the robber is being tried. It's 10 years later. Public prosecutor says to my friend, where is the bike? She says, I went to the US to study, and in the meanwhile my mother gave it up at scrap. She sold it to the scrap dealer or whatever. The guy says, you are in trouble, because it is by law that you are supposed to maintain this evidence. Her bike. Okay, so he says you are in trouble. So then he says, sir, what do we do now? He says, okay, just do some chai pani, I will take care of it. What do you do? We gave him 500 rupees. The same who had decided that we will be anti-corruption and we will buy those. You gave the 500 rupees and to avoid the thing. So can we say that we were honest or not honest? No? Life will always throw these things at us. So it is best not to identify with any of these concepts at all. Let life unfold naturally. I am not making a judgment on what was done was whether right or wrong or whatever, right? I am just saying that let life unfold naturally without making any judgment about the person that we are. Why? Because this person does not exist. This person is purely made up just from all of these thoughts. You have unconvinced eyes, so you can yeah, yeah. So I didn't completely answer. It's true. Correct. Now what? Find out your true identity. So we have seen now that I am not an object in this world. I am not the body. I am not the imagined person which I always believed myself to be. Therefore, who am I now? Right? Who am I now? And this can be found out in this moment. Right now we can do this. We can do this. Yeah, we'll do right now. So there, in this moment, all this is appearing. This body is here, the breath is here, no? Thoughts can be here, emotions can be here. There's an awareness of all of this. There's even an awareness of the sense that I am here. No? So if I were to ask any of you, you would say, where are you? I am here. I am here. So there's even this sense that I am here. And even subtler than that, there's a sense that I am. The sense that I am. There's a being. No? And I've tried very effective way trying to point people to the I am. Rather than that, it's better to say stop being now. When you stop being. No? So that which you cannot stop, that is what I'm referring to as the beingness. So you're here now. Yes. So there's a confirmation that I am here. So this, who is aware of the fact that you are here? There's an awareness of even this fact, isn't it? You can do it very playfully, yes. Not like very with a lot of mind, just very playfully. Are you here now? Yes. Who is aware of this? Does this one come and go? Does it have any attributes? Does it have any desires or aversions? Does it have any emotions or moods? Is it concerned about what is going to happen next? Have you ever not been this? Except in your own imagination. In the good times and the bad times. In great joy and in great suffering. This one is the ever unchanging one. Does it need any love? Does it need to find any happiness? Is there ever a moment when you're not this? This is your ever-present self. Does it need any effort whatsoever? So this is our true identity. Is this concerned with any attack? In what way can you attack this? Is this concerned with any attack? This self, can it be bothered about anything that you can throw at it? So the false identity, based on what it is made up of, can be shaken by verbal attacks. Like we said, good father, good husband, bad husband. The false identity can be attacked in this way. But this one, who is aware of your own presence, here, in what way can you attack this one? So once we have found irrefutably that I have always only been this, then all other false identification must dissolve with it. And it's this simple. Find out how you know that you are here. There's an awareness of even this I am. Does not need the mind at all. It is prior to the mind, so the mind cannot report from here. Don't ask me to solve the divine mystery. It is how could this self confuse itself to be this mere person? That answer I do not have. At best, what I like to say is it's just entertainment. Yeah.
Can you please comment on conflict and why we fear it so much?
The question is, again,
Comment on conflict and why we fear it so much.
can you comment on conflict and why do we fear it so much? Conflict and why do we fear it so much? It is not that everyone fears it. Some thrive on conflict. For some, the day is not over till they had a conflict. Right? For some, there is this aversion to conflict. Internal conflict. Yes. As long as there is belief in thought, there will always be internal conflict, because thoughts are never consistent. It will tell you some story one day, it will tell you, the mind will tell you the completely different story the next day. So, we are fearful of conflict because we are scared of the attack that comes along with it, in terms of what the other person might say. And we can be fearful about this only when we have some element of truth that we feel that could come in that. We could, and our close relationships are the best mirrors of this. When do we get the most upset? When somewhere we also believe that there's something true in this. If we were to know that it's complete nonsense, we would just discard it as the rantings of a madman. But what affects us is the thing that we ourselves feel a little guilty about, or there's some truth that we've given in this. So that is one fear, that this person will rake up all of these things which I have been repressing anyway, and I felt that they're going away now. Just when I was over them, here they come. That is one. So that can be one reason for fear. The second reason for fear could be that you are not good at looking at your emotions from a distance. So when some emotions arise, could be anger, could be some other emotion, sadness, in conflict, all these emotions can arise. Then you involve yourself too much in these emotions and you're stuck feeling bad, feeling angry. Nobody likes to feel all this. No? So if you're very, and some people look at this as a badge of honor. I'm a very emotional person. So it's not something great. That means that I just go with every emotion that comes. It's like saying I go with every thought that comes. So emotions, like thoughts, must be given their space, must not be resisted, and you will find that they will dissolve. But if you find that you are carried away too easily by your emotions, you cannot like conflict. There are some who are also addicted to emotion. So if they're not feeling some strong emotions, like something missing in my day, let me go create some drama. So it becomes like a addiction also. So, but if you're fearful of conflict, then it is because you're fearful of the attack that is coming in terms of the thoughts and words, or you're fearful of the emotions that could come. So my advice is that just let everything come and go. If it is to be the most horrific conflict, it cannot touch what you really are. You stay as the self, let everything play out, and in this fearlessness you will find that conflict will get reduced anyway. That you cannot play the trick of having this expectation and pretending to be fearless. No? You have to really look at it. You have to really look at it and say, what is it that I am afraid of? Which emotion is it that seems to have so much power over me? What are the words that the other being can say which seem to rattle me still? Why is it that I am still deeply identified with these? So for the really juicy ones, we cannot just sweep them under the carpet. 99% of all our vasanas, tendencies are just dissolved when we let go. There's some these juicy ones which must be inquired into, and life will keep showing these ones to us again and again and again till we have inquired and seen them to be as false as everything else. If some things still seem more special than the others, those will still keep repeating for us, so that we know that as any other appearance, they are as meaningless as anything else that came. To the one that is all there is, what could have meaning? It's like somebody living next to the Ganga, you're trying to show him some lake or pond somewhere. What meaning can it have? So once you realize that you are this pure awareness itself, what can this phenomenal world offer you? Was that on the chat, the question, or was it on Facebook?
The text.
Or was it text? And if I'm missing any chat question, can you just retype it, because there's a lot of chat to catch up on. If you could just type your question again, we can look at it. So once our false identification falls away, once you realize who you really are, or now you've tasted it for a few moments, then all the false can only dissolve in all of this. Please, yeah, please.
You asked Chekhov, who is aware that
Yes. Yes.
But I still have the ability to hear everything.
Yes. Yes.
See
Yes.
sounds.
Yes.
Is that what you mean by awareness?
It is
Active
the,
awareness?
yeah, it is only one awareness.
I can sense a faculty inside, that's all. I can
Yes.
sense it.
Who can sense this faculty? So there's an awareness that there is the ability to hear. There's an awareness even of this. No? Right now you are aware that hearing the hum of the AC is happening.
There is no I. What you mean is,
There is no I.
it's just the perception.
Yeah. Or there's a perceiving. Hmm?
This perceiving.
And there is no I. It's just a perceiving. Where are you in all of this?
And the perceiving.
You must tell me. Where does the perceiving start and where does it end? Please. We can all do this. So we can, in the meanwhile, we can look at this. Northeast says, can there be a thought without attention? Can there be a thought without attention? So it's very tricky, no? So you walk into a new place, there are hundreds of objects, but you paid attention, or attention is gone only to 10 of them. Do the other 90 exist, or they don't exist? Huh? Exactly. So because there is only me, therefore they don't exist. Huh? So but so I'm not saying that they cannot be thought without attention, but the question is just the same. Schrodinger's cat. You put the cat in the box with no observer. Is there a cat or no cat? The fact is, for you there is no cat. Therefore, for us there is no thought when there is no attention on it. Now, Vishal Naveen says, hello master, after understanding the awareness, do I have to look and understand that all is awareness? No. After understanding that I am awareness, there is nowhere else left to look. We do not have to understand all of the phenomenal existence, because it is seen that it all arises from the sense I am itself.